I'm going to get into tearing that motor down. I'm not going to have a beer yet, but it's just there just for the sake of it being there. Anyhow, let's get into this shit here. Okay, so we got our brake clean, got afterburner oil going. These little HPIs use, it's like a JSE style screw. They're kind of annoying because like half the freaking Phillips in the world don't fit them. So we're gonna pull the carburetor off. These are really different style. Well, I wouldn't really say style of engine, but just how they kind of were back in the day, where they didn't have a pinch bolt. You can see there's a provision for one, but they never put it in. They just use two little screws to hold the carburetors down, so it's kind of a pain in the ass, but especially if you want to find a replacement carb for it. We're going to pull that carburetor off. There is an O-ring. Don't lose that. A small bore carburetor. Oh shit, yeah, that's a tiny one. I think I have a big bore carburetor actually. That's a really small one. That's single needle too. It's only got a high speed, no low speed adjustment. Okay, so usually with these, what I like to do is get rid of all the Phillips screws and go with Allen cap screws instead. Much better. So we're going to remove the back plate, and we're just gonna take it apart, just have a quick look here and see what we got in there. And I haven't turned it over. I did remove the clutch, which is sitting in front of me at the moment. So that's just a boring job. It was just one nut and everything came off. Okay. There's our starter shaft and back plate. There's our gasket. You want to make sure you don't lose that. Now, if you can't find a replacement gasket for your engine, it's a paper one like that. If you're really good with a blade and a little thin piece of gasket paper, like the thinnest one you can get at the auto parts store, you can just cut your own. You can also cut your own for here too. Pretty straightforward. Right, let's get that cylinder head off of there. So he explained to me, as I just talked to him a few minutes ago, that none of the screws were tight. And thank God they weren't, because these screws, these little Phillips, are soft. A soft metal, soft alloy, I guess, of something. I don't really know what exactly kind of grade of steel they are, but not super strong. And I do strip real easy. I guess I'm gonna try and find some Allen cap screws to go in there. As you can see, there's a little tiny Phillips. There's our cylinder head. Just a cast head. I think I do have another cylinder head, one of those purple ones laying around. It looks something similar to this, so I mean, yeah, that would, oops, what am I doing here? Yeah, it's obviously not going to fit in there, but, yeah, it basically looks something like that. It would look pretty cool on there, so if I can find it, I'll put it on for sure. So there's our head gasket. These only have one head gasket, and it's aluminum crush type. They don't make them anymore. There's our sleeve. It's an ABN engine, which is aluminum, brass, nickel. Remove our gasket. Let's see where our sleeve comes out of here. Now, I will say, if you have one of these, there is no locating notch in the block to put the sleeve back in. And the other thing is, when I get the piston, I'll show you, is it's very easy to screw these engines up. So that little notch, you can see there is a notch there. It always faces towards the back. There's a casting line in the block, and it meets up with that casting line. Very important. So we're going to pop our sleeve. Old school, pretty thick nickel sleeve. It freaking weighs a ton. Right, now we're going to remove our piston. So rotate that up top dead center. Now if you're not sure what way the piston's supposed to go back in, like if you're going to lose the direction or take it completely apart, just put a little scribe mark on the back of the connecting rod, just a little scratch. I already know what way it goes, so I'm not worried about it. But yeah, just put a little nick there, and that way you can know there's a witness mark. So rotate up top dead center. And if we're cool, we should be able to get that off of there. Here we go. And push out our crank. crankshaft removed. There is the bare block. Well, it's got the bearings in it still. But what I was referring to with these pistons is, you see that hole? This is where people screw up really bad with these things. Now, when they put them together, because it doesn't look like the piston should go in any direction at all, just except for whatever way you want to put it back in. But you see that hole? It always faces opposite to the exhaust port. Now, if you're looking through the exhaust port and you see that big hole in the piston with the HPI 15s and 12s, or the OS 12 and 15 CVX, or just CV, and if you see that hole in the piston, stop. It will never run. Take it apart and flip it around so it only looks like that. That piston has to face the back of the block, or that hole in the piston has to face the back of the block. The other thing is, there's a little Teflon plug right here that holds the wrist pin in place. If you lose that, the wrist pin will move out and it'll contact the inside of the cylinder and destroy the engine. It'll ruin your piston and sleeve forever. That goes the same with the OS 12 and 15 CV or CVX models, or the 15FE, 12FE, 12E, and 15E engines. So just keep that in mind when you're working on these things, because it's very easy to get that wrong. Or people will put the sleeve back in, and that long elongated port faces always towards the exhaust port. If you put that in wrong, well, she ain't going to run no matter what you do. Or if it does run, it'll run poorly. If barely make any power, it'll be extremely hard to start. So yeah. So what we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of brake parts cleaner, and we're just going to just kind of clean the inside of the block out. Yeah, the outside's already clean enough. I'm not too worried about that. I just want to get all the whatever he said was in there out of there. He said, do not turn it over. It's dirty inside. Alright. Nice and clean. There's your rear bearing. These do not have a sealed front. They have a metal shielded front bearing, which you can take it out and put a sealed one in. The HPI 15FE, 15E, 12E, and 12FE. Or whatever the hell. Yeah, 12E, 15E, 15FE, 12FE. Yeah, whatever. And the, I believe, Infinity 18. There's a few others. 15SS, 15SC, I think. All use the same bearings and the same crank. They're essentially all the same engine. The only things that were different was the combustion chamber size, piston and sleeve, and the wrist pin. Other than that, they're completely interchangeable. In case you didn't know that, but now you do. That's a little bit of shit there still. Oops. Let's give this another cleansing. Okay. Should actually be wearing gloves and playing around with brake clean. It's not good shit. But I make sure I don't get it on my hands, or as very little exposure as possible. I also do have a very well ventilated area going on here, so please be careful. Just feel that rear bearing. No chunky, no grindy. That's good. The front one. Oh yeah, we're cool. Yeah, that's good shit. Yep. Perfect. Okay. Now, here's our crank. And do the same treatment. Usually, I don't have any Q-tips, unfortunately. But this engine's never been run. It's just got some dirt in it. I guess it's just been left open for 30 years. When you're cleaning out an engine, get your Q-tip, spray some brake clean on it, and run it in and out of here, and spin it tons and tons and tons of times. Because oftentimes, if there is dirt, when the crank is spinning, it'll throw it against the sides of the walls on the inside of the crank, and it'll stay there. So you want to make sure to clean that out. Just give that a little bit of a drink. Yeah. So, and if you need a replacement crankshaft for a 15FE or 12FE or whatever, or 12E or 15E, a VX16 crankshaft will fit this engine. It's basically the exact same. It's the same shank. The counterweights are the same. The port's the same. Timing's the same. Blah, blah, blah. So if you can't, or if the crank's broken or it's damaged or something or bent, and you can't find a replacement, that's what you need. So we take our piston. Remember, don't lose that little Teflon puck. If you lose it, you're screwed. We're just going to take that guy and give it a little bit of a rinse. Airplane works. Alpine works. Come on, brain. Work today. Was asking me if I was going to start this engine up today, and I'm not sure if I'm going to or not. If I can find all the rest of the stuff that I need to do it and chuck it up in the stand, then I will, but I will, because it does have a long crank. That means I can put a prop on it. It's not really good just to stick an engine in a stand without any load on it and just let it sit there and spin and rev the guts out of it forever. Yeah, not the best in the world for it, but put some load on it, wrap the cylinder head up, let it freaking get nice and hot up to 250 degrees or so. Right. Oh, I'm trying to clean the head. This does have a little bit of varnishing, so I'm assuming it has been run at one point. Or maybe that just could be the staining from the preservation from the factory. Right, let's put it back together again. So we got our oil. And put some inside that rear bearing. Right there. A couple drops down the bore itself. And that will kind of seep its way into the front bearing. The crank, put some oil on it. You don't have to soak everything, just a little bit of a coating on there. Some on there too. You don't have to oil the threads or anything, but if you want, you can just kind of smear it around and just kind of coat all the bare surfaces, because remember, we did spray this with brake clean, which eats all the oil off of everything. So yeah, just kind of give it a little bit of a rubbing. Stick her back in. Always make sure like you turn everything when you're putting it together, kind of like make sure there's no tight spots. I mean, I've already explained that when the piston gets up the top dead center, it's going to feel notchy because it's a pinch, or it's a tapered bore, which is normal. But like this, you shouldn't feel any notchy, grindy, anything funny. It should turn nice and butter smooth, which it does. Okay, so our piston next. We're going to put some oil up in that wrist pin there on both sides. Which is a very high stressed area. And just kind of move the pin back and forth a bunch of times. Make sure that oil's kind of gotten all over the place. This is a steel rod, I think. Oh, look at that. I didn't notice that, but check that out. It's got 2 lubrication holes in there. You see that? Wild. I've never seen that, only in airplane engines. Freaking crazy. Okay. So I'm going to put some oil in there. Oil in there, put some oil in the piston. Like that. Doesn't have to be soaked. I mean, I've seen people just absolutely drench shit in oil, and it's just doesn't really do any good. I mean, well, it does to a point, but all it does is make the thing an absolute pain in the ass to start. Okay, so we're going to put that piston back in. Remember what I was saying? That side with a hole in it faces the back of the block. Very important, because if you put it in wrong, it will never ever run. There you go. And just shink. So you can see, if you look through the exhaust port, you won't see that hole in the piston. See what I'm saying? Because if you do, it ain't gonna go for you. We take our sleeve. Figure the technology compared to, you know, how things are nowadays in these old engines is just fucking pretty Stone Age stuff. Pretty neat to see how thick these sleeves are. I mean, even if you look at a Pro 15 sleeve for, you know, just because I got one sitting here, you can see the difference. This is an ABC, this is ABN. Right? This is brass, what is it called there? Brass, chrome. Yeah, brass, nickel, no. Well, I can't remember. Brass something, whatever it is. Brass, chrome, something. Anyways, whatever. So, you can see how thick they had to make the sleeves back then. You know, with an ABN engine. And also, like I said, they made one casting for about 7 or 8 different engines. So they kind of went, okay, well, instead of making the bore size any bigger, why not just cast a shit ton of them, put a different name on it, and go from there. And that's kind of what they did. The thing is, a lot of people believe that these are actually HPI engines. They're actually not, even though it says it's an HPI on the side. Just gonna try and line up that piston there. Let's use the back piece of this guy. Yeah, even though it says it's an HPI engine, it's actually not. They're actually made by Toki Manufacturing in Japan. Let's see here. There we go. The piston's just being a little stubborn. So if you look through that exhaust port there, if you line it up completely perfect, the port will be a little bit closed off on one side, so you want it kind of like that. You want to make sure that it's right smack dab in the middle and just a tiny offset with these engines. Hold the sleeve down, turn it over. Yep, everything feels good. Nice little pinch at the top there. That little click, click. That's perfect. Excellent. Put our head gasket. Some people say it's a head shim. It kind of is. Whatever. Anyways, but yeah, these are made by Toki Manufacturing in Japan, and they went under. I think there was one that was labeled a Tamiya. There was all sorts of them out there. So a lot of the parts were interchangeable. I think there's a Duratrax variant of this engine as well. I think it was a 12 or something. Duratrax 12E, or not 12E, 12 something, I can't remember. It's been so long, there's been so many of these things. This engine's probably about 20, 25 years old. It's 90s technology, that's for sure. But I mean, they run alright. They're not the most powerful thing in the world, but for a little 110 scale car, you know, little, maybe an RC10 or a, for fuck's sakes, old Kyosho Sandmaster or something like that, you know, they do the job. They run all right. They tune super easy. It's just one needle. So, okay, drop our cylinder head on. Make sure it's locked into position, because if it's not, you will crush or cut the head gasket when you tighten it back down. And this goes for the same crisscross pattern. Yeah, I really hate Phillips screws. It just, they're a blight on society as we know it. I'm not going to tighten these things up as tight as I can get them, because I want to take them out at a later date and put in Phillips screws, Allen cap screws instead, because the world has no place for Phillips screws. Oh yeah, it's got really damn good compression. I barely even turn it with my fingers. Oh yeah, no, that's fantasticus. Alright, so our paper gasket, make sure it's not torn or damaged. Some people say to put silicone on them. I've never had them really leak before. Usually there's enough oil on them that they don't really leak. The castings are pretty flat, so shouldn't usually be too much of an issue. Just gonna give that a little bit of a spray down really quick. Yeah, alright. So our crank is at bottom dead center. We're going to put our starter shaft at bottom dead center with that little notch so they can line up together. So you hold the crank with one finger, stick them together so that notch in the top faces up in the casting. That's so the piston won't come down and smash it. Put those two together. And you'll hear it when it's ready to go in. You'll hear a little click. Oh, it looks like it already went. If you hold the crank and you turn the starter shaft, they should both turn at the same unison. Or in unison. Not one turns and the other one doesn't. Okay. Are there little tiny Phillips screws in here? I know, freaking Phillips just waiting to strip at the drop of a hat. I'll never find out who actually ever invented these things. I like to kick the guy in the nuts personally, especially the fact that the Japanese ones are different. JSI screws. which look like a normal Phillips, but I assure you they are different. So if you guys are working on Hondas or Yamahas, Kawasaki, Suzuki's, Hodakas, Shindawa, whatever the hell you're working on, invest yourself a set of JSI screwdrivers. It will make all the difference in your life. Also invest in a set of left-hand drill bits. Now I know what you're thinking. That's a joke. There's no such thing. Oh, but there is. There is such a thing as left-hand drill bits. They are a lifesaver because if you do run into a problem where you do have to drill a screw out, when you have a right-hand drill bit, you're actually, when you're drilling in, you're actually tightening the screw down more because you're pushing on it, and that friction is actually making the screw more of a bastard to extract. So if you have left-hand drill bits and you're turning, you're trying to get these screws out of here, it's going to be biting in the direction of removal, right? And it's often just back the screw right out with it. So left-hand drill bits are a must. I actually don't have any at the moment. I actually need to go out and buy a new set because I worn mine out from being ancient. My carburetor, put a drop of oil in there. Remember a gasket. Don't lose this. You don't need a goop silicone. The gasket's there for a reason. If you lost it, then yeah, fine. Use a little bit of Moto Seal one or something like that. But the minute I see people freaking, you know, with engines and they got the red silicone over it is when I start to get a little bit worried. So we're going to put a little bit of oil down on that crank. Just put a couple drops down on it. Turn it back and forth that way. Just nothing sitting dry. It can't sit dry. This is just 5W30 engine oil and transmission fluid mixed together. So, and it's fine. Never once had an issue with it. You can use air tool oil if you want. That works perfectly fine as well. Yeah, air tool oil, I can get the big bottles of it at the hardware store for, what, $6 from Camel Hausfeld or something like that, or Ingersoll. So you can use that too. Works perfectly fine. Usually, if I'm going to be running an engine right away, I will put it back together with castor oil. But since I'm not going to be running this right away, I don't want it to get sticky or stiff. Although I haven't had any issue with the clots so far. Yeah. And with these side screws, snug. That's it. You don't need to crank them tight, because if you do, and evenly, make sure even tightness on both sides, because it can pull the carburetor one side or the other slightly. Yeah, you got to really watch it, because if you strip those carburetors out, I mean, you just went and done screwed yourself. So, okay. Just had to clean up some extra oil that spilt there. But there it is. It's back together. Absolutely wondermiss. So I'm going to dig through my shit bin here at a later date or whatever. I might have a purple cylinder head for this. If not, I'll see if I can find one somewhere. And I'll stuff one on there, and that'll look super cool. And like I said, I'm going to get rid of them freaking JSI screws as well, because fuck those. But I'm going to be putting a cylinder head on this and doing a rebuild on that. Like I said, guys, the weather's been terrible here. It's been raining so much, I haven't been able to get out any, so this is just kind of screwing around vids for now. But anyways, as always, guys, thanks for watching. And keep on burning nitro out there. Cheers.